Creative Journeys is your go-to podcast for all things creativity. I'm your co-host, Dave Petrosky, chair of the Communication, Media, and Screen Studies Department.
And I am your co-host, Melanie, Venezuelan designer and educator. This is the podcast about creativity, what it is in its many forms, and how we can become more creative in our everyday lives.
Well, welcome back to Creative Journeys. I'm Dave, and
and I'm Melanie.
And we're here in February at this point. It seems like the year is just like barreling through. But this is our first guest of the new year. And you probably can hear it in my voice if you've listened to the podcast before that I have a little bit of a cold. So I bear with me. That also comes with February, I guess. But Melanie, you want to introduce our guest?
Of course. And I also want to mention that this is going to be our first guest with video.
Yes, that's true. That's
We're very excited for all of these changes coming up.
Yeah.
But our wonderful guest is Dr. Miriah Kelly, who is an assistant professor here at Southern Connecticut State University. And her research focuses on socio-ecological systems, particularly the human dimensions of ocean and coastal climate change. Miriah, welcome.
It's a joy to be here. An awesome way to start 2025.
Yeah,
Technically, it was just the Lunar New Year, so
yes,
it is the year of renewal.
Yeah.
Is it? Maybe that's why January took forever.
That's January was a long year.
Yeah. What have you been up to? I mean, you're we've talked before, in other instances, but give folks a sense of like what you're doing, what your background is, and that kind of stuff. We ask everybody to do that. So
sure. Well, I would say it's an exciting time to be Professor Kelly. I'm currently pending my promotion and tenure file, which is exciting, along with Dr. Uribe
We are rooting for you.
And I've been working on some really cool projects, and then also working on different ways that we can integrate students into what we're doing in the world. So some of the really cool things I've been working on are our Ocean Identity Initiative, which is all about finding better ways to measure and assess human connections with ocean environments, which as we think about creativity today, there's nothing more inspiring in the natural world than the ocean. And our research is really trying to tap into the social and emotional ways that people actually understand their relationship with those specific types of environments and ecosystems. And that has just been an absolutely exciting project. We presented that work here locally at the national level and then internationally. The project is just about to wrap up. We are soon to launch the validated survey that we created, and we'll also have a toolkit available for people to use our ocean identity framework to assess how they're doing in helping people build their relationship with the ocean. So that's a really exciting project that's sort of all kind of coming up right now, and I really look forward to building on that in the future. Mm-hmm. Another really exciting area where I work is in the ocean climate space. I support a very diverse group of ocean climate scientists who are researchers and independent contractors from around the world. And in that work, we do a lot of looking at policy alignment across international ocean treaties specifically. And so part of what we're hoping to do in the next year is really engage students in that network and continue to bring them to the places where we travel in the world to really engage with others and enjoy different cultures and the creativity and expression that other cultures have, I think, is awesome for students.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So much amazing work.
Yeah.
And plans ahead. I can't wait to see that toolkit and give it a try myself and maybe even incorporate it into some coursework.
Shout out actually to a design student, Diana, who did our work for us on the oceanidentity.org website. So if you go check that out, you'll see many of the design assets that are there were work from a Southern student.
Yeah,
That's cool.
Diana is one of our graduates from last year. She was an amazing student, amazing designer. She's actually in her journey now with freelancing and working with a lot of nonprofits and a lot of opportunities to make the world a better place. So I'll take the opportunity that you just gave her a shout out to add to that. And maybe we'll put her link on our episode to promote a fellow designer.
I think it's important because she met with this group of scientists, and we all have very different backgrounds, and sort of took in what we were saying about the theory and the conceptual model that we were developing from a very academic standpoint, and using creativity and narrative kind of took our thinking scientifically and turned it into this beautiful artwork that very much represents what we were trying to convey. And also, I think one of the things I have always cared a lot about is that we're not just doing science for the sake of science, that we're doing science that has meaning. And it's through those design assets and the development of the website that it actually becomes really meaningful to people. Mm-hmm. And so if it wasn't for communication people and design people helping scientists to translate that into things that people care about and find meaning in, I don't think we would be where we are today with the way people care about the environment.
Yeah. I'm interested, because looking at your background, I realized that you actually have communication background, right? So you had your master's in communication as well as your undergraduate.
Yep.
I'm going to be academic geeky for a second, but did you get involved with NCA at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And how about the Association for Rhetoric of Science and Technology?
No, I still follow along with NCA, but I'm still also a member of the International Environmental Communication Association, which also aligns with ICA.
Okay.
Can I ask, as a outsider, what is NCA and what is ICA, and maybe for our listeners too?
Yeah, sure. So NCA is the National Communication Association, and then ICA is the International Communication Association. And ARST, I believe it's ARST, it's the Association for the Rhetoric of Science and Technology. They have their annual meetings that coincide with the NCA National Convention. So, I've been a part of that a couple of times, mostly as an observer rather than an audience member rather than a presenter. But I mean, it's something that I am familiar with, and I know the challenges of promotion of science in general is a big challenge, and just the way that when we talk about the climate and climate change and all that kind of stuff, the way that that's been sort of framed in the public discourse has kind of changed with time and that sort of thing. Where do you, just thinking about it from the way that conversation has developed, and the projects that you have are definitely building awareness and trying to help promote, a healthy respect for the environment and that sort of thing. But what's your general feel about how our discourse about science is evolving at this point? And I know that's a kind of a deep question, and I said I was going to be kind of academic geeky at this point, but that's
You know what? I think that's what makes the work really exciting right now, is that I've been able to witness this change over the last 15 or 20 years and how we treat science, how we talk about science. But I think one of the big things is that we've become more understanding of the complexities of the systems that are the science we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot more nuance now to the ways that we talk about different ecosystems, or what we say in socio-ecological systems terms, right? Yeah. And so there's been this diversification of the science into really focusing on water, or really focusing on land use, or really focusing on the ocean. And one of the things that's really exciting is that we're starting to see a focus now on more alignment of those different silos that we've seen emerge over the last 5, 10, 15 years. Especially as it relates to climate change, because it is one of those environmental issues that really taps into every type of ecosystem we have on Earth. And so it's really challenging people to think in a more holistic systems type way. But I will say, when I started doing climate change research in the early 2000s, it was pretty taboo. And definitely not an area that a lot of people were sort of jumping into.
Sure.
It was, a lot of scientists sort of moved into that space with hesitance because of the way it had been framed and the issues related to the politicization of the issue. And I will say to our students who maybe are listening out there, this is a way where I feel like being bold and not being afraid to take on the challenge of researching something that maybe was a little bit more taboo, controversial, conflict-laden. Later in my career, I think it's really benefited me, and I say that professionally, but also I think personally, taking on a challenge like that early on in my career has paid off in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
I wanted to add to that and maybe also ask you another questions. And now I feel like we're just bombarding you with questions. But we are friends, but we never really talked about your background in communications. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to do that. And as you just mentioned students and not being afraid to do some research and tackle some new topics, I am curious, how did you decide to make that switch from communications to climate change, and how it may have been very easy for you? It may have been very daunting to go to something that was, very different, because if we are thinking of communication, we're not necessarily looking into, let's become a scientist now. Am I going to be behind other scientists? How am I going to move forward in this path? And I think it would be of great inspiration, too, for the students to maybe think about, like, okay, and we mentioned this in the past, how we grow all the time and we're different every year. And in 5 years, we may want to do different things. And it will be great for people to understand and maybe hear your experience about it.
Yeah, well, back in the day, in the communication field, there was sort of an emerging interest in environment and the institution of environmental organizations, especially from the NGO perspective. And so early on, when I started studying communication, which, oh, by the way, I am a graduate of Central Connecticut State University. So I'm very, very proud of the fact that I am a product of the university where I now work and get to mentor and inspire students the way I was mentored and inspired during my time. And that's absolutely what happened. I had been studying communication. I had a great interest in the environment. I've always loved being outdoors. And so I started studying environmental organizations and looked into more of the intersections of communication and environment as a place where I might actually fit well. And I had a really great mentor later on in life say to me, and I say this to my students all the time, that the place where you belong is the place where the world's need meets your greatest passion. And I've always been incredibly passionate about the environment, about being outdoors. And I started to recognize a need for communication infusion into the scientific realm across the board. And the environment was just a specific place where I thought I would be valuable.
Yeah, and I think some of the complexity of what you're talking about in terms of the career evolution, but also it seems like what you're studying now is very much a part of a central issue that communication as a discipline deals with, which is the formation of identity, right? And what I got from your introduction was it seems like the projects that you're undertaking are building some sort of greater awareness of how the environment is integral to our identity and that our personal experience, not only our lives, but also our cultural significance and those sorts of things. And I think that, this is something that I think in the contemporary world, especially when we're so mediated and everything, that we kind of lose track of the embodied experience that the climate represents. And we're only, like we were talking about this being February and it's cold and, chilly and snow is all over the place and we get a snowstorm every 3 days or whatever. We tend, I don't know, this is just my feeling lately, is that when we're talking about the environment, it's always about the discomfort that it causes, right? Rather than an appreciation of what it gives to us and what our relationship is with that environment, right? I'm just curious, like what your thinking is about that, just in terms of, is that a driver for you in terms of the way that you are approaching your projects and things?
Absolutely. And not just from a scientific standpoint of knowing that if we can build one's individual identity with and how they think about themselves in the environment, that ultimately drives behavior. But I think even from social justice and just everybody should have access to the environment in a way that they find meaningful and engaging. And I think for me, has always been about the engagement piece and getting people to have those opportunities to participate in the environment in ways that are meaningful to them and not necessarily in the ways that I think a lot of us like to kind of push people into doing. Right. Like we want everybody to go hiking on the trails, right, which is all great and very good, but there are a lot of people out there, when you're a social scientist like me, you talk to people and they're like, there's no way I'm going down that place in the middle of the dark and there might be animals and there's no bathroom and I have my kid with me. Like, there's no way I'm going down there, right? And so a lot of my work, it has, and especially with our Ocean Identity Initiative, has turned to thinking about not just how do we convince people from that information deficit model of it is safe, here's some statistics, but to actually help grow their relationship with that place. Yeah. And since it is February and love is in the air, I'll throw out a term there that I think about often, and it's thalassophilia, and that is the love of the ocean. And so when I think about the big drive that I have, it's that I'm so fortunate to have this feeling of thalassophilia in my life, and I know that very much drives how I treat the environment and how I treat other people, I think, as well. And so its big goal is to sort of give everybody the same opportunity to build that kind of loving relationship with the ocean or with a particular part of the environment that they find meaningful or beautiful to them.
Yeah.
I think that engagement part that you just mentioned is very important, because I feel like that's what we're all trying to do. Just get our students to engage in the topic, engage in the conversation, and find something that is meaningful to them, because it doesn't have to be exactly what is meaningful to us, right? Like when I'm teaching about social justice in my classes, I tell my students I'm passionate about immigration. I'm passionate about refugee causes because they are dear to my background, to my story. But I don't need them to believe in the same things that I do, and I don't want them to. Sure. So I always give them the opportunity. This is going to be the project. This is what we're doing. But what is important to you? It can be something as wonderful and playful as puppies and helping animals, or it could be, let's think about climate change. What can we do to raise awareness? Or let's look at other causes, such as issues with homeless people or issues with people not getting enough food, and how we can make the environment better.
Yeah. And I think that it's getting at a deeper question, just in terms of creativity and we talk from time to time, on our questionnaire, we kind of talk about inspirations and that kind of stuff. And, it seems to me that, what we're getting at is like, what is this, where does your passion lie? Where is this, sort of deep curiosity that you have, right? And I think one of the things that kind of comes out in what we're talking about, especially when we're talking about the ocean, is, having grown up on the Jersey Shore, but, not like the show Jersey Shore. Like it was like I was north of that.
I would have never guessed.
But
Not a gym tanning laundry kind of guy.
my favorite, the thing that I'm trying to get at is just that we have sort of like these limited notions of what particular parts of the environment. Like if we don't live there, right? Then it becomes disassociated or something like that, right? So if we're not, on the shore all the time, we don't get to see it at these other moments. So we have like this sort of limited exposure to what it is and what it offers, right? Having grown up on the shore, I got to see the ocean in the winter, like, and what it's like to walk on the beach when there's, snow. That's a different appreciation, I think, for that environment, right? And that kind of thing, it comes into different aspects of my life as well that I don't even really notice until I realize that we're doing, like, we'll pick places to go on vacation, and I always for some reason, I always wind up wanting to go someplace that has a port, like on the coast, and I don't know where that's and I'm just realizing now, like in this conversation, that maybe it's because that's where I grew up, but I guess one of the things that that this is tapping into is that the way that the environment can be this inspiration for us, and be this source of I think of different artists that have been sort of totally motivated and overtaken by, the beauty of the environment and the overwhelming nature. Like my mother was a huge John Denver fan, and the whole Rocky Mountain High kind of phenomena that he kind of encapsulated in his some of his albums was this sort of overwhelming appreciation of, and that became his artistic inspiration. But I guess this is I'm gonna stop talking at this point. But I'm interested in hearing about more about like that inspiration component for you, and like we got a kind of a sense that the ocean is part of that, but like how do you tease that out in maybe either your students or your colleagues that you're working with? Like this isn't like scientists aren't necessarily talking about their inspiration, right? So like, but that's part of what you're kind of getting at, is that this is very much a part of what we need to think about.
Yeah, I honestly have a lot of students these days who ask me, like, what keeps you inspired and hopeful when it seems like all I see is bad news? And I think everybody needs to find that, right? Find your horizon. What is that thing that you're after and care about and can be passionate about? And I think what you were explaining about why you sort of choose to go to these places is because the places we choose to be and exist are very much part of who we are and who we become as people in the world, and are very much expressions of who we are. And so sort of what we're looking at in our research is a deeper dive into, what are those things that can maybe build those relationships without necessarily having to physically go to the ocean every day to kind of have those experiences, which certainly have been the inspiration for me, is being able to see some of the most beautiful ocean environments in the world. And traveling around the world is a huge inspiration to me, to see other cultures and to experience how other people are engaging with their ocean spaces.
What's your if you could name like one ocean setting that was like the most like captivating or most exciting for you, like what one would it be?
I mean, there's so many. I can say that probably one of the most formative moments I had as a younger person, sort of exploring what I wanted to be professionally, is that there's a beautiful spot at the north point of the North Island in New Zealand. And it's where the Pacific Ocean meets the Tasman Sea. And you see the blue ocean kind of crashing right into the green sea there. And that's where the Maori people culturally believe that that's where your spirit goes when you die. And so standing there at the point and looking out and knowing that, I think that really was an important point in my life where I started to realize there's something in this that I can make of, you know, these experiences that I'm having. I will say another inspiration that absolutely keeps me going every day is my 10-year-old daughter. And I want to say this and make a point about it because I think oftentimes we overlook youth voices, and we even, I think, sometimes overlook the voices of our students because, you know, we either are the authority. But I think it's really important that we empower our students to think for themselves and to be themselves, and to know that as a professor and a mentor, it's our job not to make them be like us. Like I think, like Melanie said, that's not what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to help them reach their full capacity in life, and whatever that looks like. And so I think it's really important that we give youth the ability to kind of create themselves and be creative and not put all these boundaries and confines on their creativity. But it's a blessing to have a 10-year-old in my life every day who's drawing pictures and reminding me of, you know, what is possible in the world when you just don't have a box to think inside of.
Right. Yeah, and putting yourself out there, traveling, I agree, like, is an amazing source of inspiration. But if you don't necessarily have the financial means to do it, go out in your town. See the different things that are around you. Like here in Connecticut, I have a huge list of places that I want to see ever since I moved here. And I just keep scratching off little by little where I can find inspiration. And whether that is the ocean, or I had never thought about looking at the beach during winter, David. And I come from a tropical country, and then I lived so many years in Miami, and it never crossed my mind the beach is going to look different during the winter. And I'm not a beach person. I'm not a summer person. I like winter. I like fall.
Me too.
But it's just equally beautiful and stunning to just be standing at the beach at any point of the year and experiencing how the different seasons act around it. And it just made me think, like, you know, which oceans have impacted me too. And I would say Alaska was impressive to me, and just the calmness of the sea and how you really can just sit there for hours and hours and just think about everything. Just try to find yourself in there. And then I also had the opportunity to go to Australia last year, and I did snorkeling. I don't know that I will do this again. It was terrifying for me. But snorkeling off the coast of Brisbane, even though it was terrifying, it's in like the top 5 most amazing experiences of my life. The beauty that it is in our oceans is so impactful. And I just go around the world now telling everyone, like, you need to go snorkel in Australia. And now I'm like, well, I need now to go a little bit more up north and go to the Great Barrier Reef and do that, because if this is the experience that I had here, I can't even imagine how it is over there. And now I need to go to New Zealand and have that experience.
That's a bucket list place for me, for sure. Yeah.
But even thinking of like, and I had not thought about this until you mentioned it, David, I crave mountains.
Yeah.
Because in Caracas, I grew up with a valley around me. So my view for the first 16 years of my life was mountains.
Yeah.
And Florida never really felt like home. And now I realize one of those reasons is because I need to see hills. I need to see mountains. I need to see, how it gets smoky or like foggy a little bit, or with some snow, or it's really shining
Sure.
brightful.
Yeah. Well, I am not well traveled at all. So I'm very, I'm bound to the tri-state area, I suppose.
I want to say, for the record, that's cool too.
Well,
It's okay to not
I'm working
to
on
travel
that.
the world.
Like,
it's okay. It's not for everyone.
I love the New England territory.
I'm looking forward to being able to travel, and a lot of it's been career bound and kids and all that kind of stuff. So, but one of the things that I do is live vicariously through my friends and family. My daughter just went to Patagonia, and the pictures she brought back were breathtaking of the mountains, and just being able to see that and see I was so envious, but at the same time so also inspired, and just to see her passion for what she had experienced and how exciting it was, and that they were able to go on these super long hikes.
It
and
sounded amazing.
Absolutely.
I was talking with 2 students that went on the trip last week, and they had to leave, and I didn't want them to leave to class. I was like, I just want to keep listening to the stories and seeing
my gosh.
pictures.
It was,
And our International Education Office provides so many different opportunities for students to study abroad and get those types of experiences while they are students. And I know personally, I also studied abroad. I went to Spain twice, and I find that is an incredibly impactful, important part of student growth, especially in the undergraduate years.
Yeah, and I think that if that opportunity is available, I mean, and the students can manage it. I mean, it can be expensive, right? And it depends on where you're going and what program it's a part of and that sort of thing. But I think that, the programs at Southern, I don't want this to be about a commercial for our school or anything, but I know that there are active programs to help support students, and grants for students to actually go on study abroad trips and those sorts of things. And, it might not be for a whole semester, but even just doing it for a couple of weeks at a time and getting to experience the world in a broader sense, I mean, it becomes this huge inspiration. I mean, my sister went to Italy when she was in high school for a study abroad kind of trip. And to this day, she talks about that trip. And this is, 40 years ago? Some 30 years ago. I'm aging her too much. She's going to kill me. It becomes this thing that's just so monumental.
Yeah, I would. As you're talking, I'm remembering that something I share with my students too, as a pivotal moment in my life, was when I was studying abroad in Spain. There was a huge an oil spill off the coast.
Oh wow!
Of kind of Portugal, and had hit parts of northern Spain there in the País Vasco, and we went to help. And I think that was obviously an important part of what I was experiencing at that point in time, because, I think about that moment and seeing a real life oil spill, and the things that I do work for now are very much resonant from those early experiences. But to your point about just getting experiences, like just going out in the world sometimes, and the research shows, right, just having conversations with people in the world and having an experience, it brings people joy and happiness. And I think in this post-COVID world, we don't talk to each other enough. And it can be really impactful if you can't get on a plane and go to my favorite place, which is actually Sardinia. Then, there's so many different ways that communication and media can bring those places to us.
Sure.
And you can engage with people around those places, right? And just, explore your community in ways that are interesting to you and explore your environment, because everybody, no matter where you live, you can go outside and there is going to be an element of nature upon you.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's the weather, the birds, the sound, there's always something in nature that people can tap into.
It reminds me of it's sort of a tangent, but not really. There's a monthly magazine in New Jersey called Weird New Jersey. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Never.
And they have I think they have a website or something like that. But it's just like strange locations and things to visit in New Jersey. Like, and they have like, you know, sort of urban legends and, you know, hauntings and all this kind of stuff. But it's like and I know that there's tons of that in Connecticut as well. But that magazine kind of jumps into my head when you're talking about like exploring the environment. Like if you're, you know, you don't want to go to the original like touristy kind of places, right? You know, there's lots more to see than what everybody always goes to see, right? You know, and I think that that's something that can be hugely inspirational for folks. Are we how are we on time?
I think we still have a few minutes.
Okay. All right. I'm making sure, doing a time check.
Yeah.
Just kind of.
I was going to bring us back to this idea of engagement too, and about when we're trying to get people to quote unquote engage with the environment. What does that look like? And early on, is learning about communication. Obviously, you know, we learn about two-way communication forms, and as we get older and as we get more on in our professional careers, it's really easy for us to forget the two-way aspect of communication. And we very much, as we become more expert in our field, tend to sort of assert what we think and feel onto others, especially as it relates to our area of expertise. But one thing that I challenge myself to do always is to think about what other people think and care about, more than I'm thinking and caring about what I'm thinking about, which I'm certain I know and can feel and know in my head, right? But I think it's more important that we go and think, okay, so this person wants to experience the environment. Why? What would they find intriguing? Why would they find that thing intriguing? What are the things that they don't want to do and why? Because it's that deeper analysis of people, and I would say individual people, that helps us understand then how do we engage. And we're very much moving away, and I've started to write about this, moving away from this concept of a stakeholder, which kind of comes with a lot of connotation that I think is off-putting to people. And so when we think about, okay, we're not engaging stakeholders to make environmental decision-making anymore, which is very much sort of an antiquated model. It's about understanding people and the ways in which they want to engage in their own communities, in their own environments, and then trying to foster that interest into whatever system fold makes sense. And so if we take that approach, it becomes a totally different paradigm for how you actually get people to come to your meeting or participate in your program. It's much more complicated.
Yeah, I've always found the idea of the stakeholder, for me, it has too much of a connection to stockholder, right? Because it just seems like it's about like who are we like indebted to, or who are we obligated to, rather than who is a partner in the things that we're trying to do. However we're trying to think about things.
But it comes out a lot in our fields of communication and design also. And I'm having those conversations a lot with the students in my interactive class, where we take the human-centered approach to design. And I constantly have to explain to them, this is about the user. You have to put yourself in their person's shoes and practice your empathy skills, because this is a big part of solving this problem. Like, how are we affecting our users? How are we going to make their lives a little bit better every day? How are we going to make an impact with people? And it's not about, let's find the biggest numbers, let's get the biggest advertising, let's get the biggest ad dollars, but thinking about who the other person is, who's going to be using your design, your app, who's going to be using your toolkit, and how they're going to find that helpful and meaningful.
And and everybody is so diverse and unique in their own being. And I think we kind of have moved away in the communication and in the science field of understanding those unique features and attributes that everyone has and valuing them in that way, because we just want to lump everybody together so we can make sense of it all and do the right thing for the most amount from the best possible, right? But and that's sort of how we've ordered things. But when we start to shape a paradigm around understanding that these diverse groups exist, they have diverse interests, they have different use cases, and trying to unpack that complexity of those groups is such a meaningful and important part of then effectively communicating, or in my case, engaging people with the environment later.
Yeah, I mean I think that's such it's such a productive way for us to start to think about how we can initiate change, right? Because if we continue to kind of think about it in terms of, profit loss and gains or pros and cons, that kind of thing, then that's giving us a very limited or one-dimensional or two-dimensional way of thinking about things, and we need to be more expansive about it. I think that when we're talking about people trying to engage with these sort of deeper questions of identity and thinking about how the environment works and how the environment means things to us. I think the thing that you're talking about just in terms of people's being aware of what other people are experiencing and their ways of thinking about things. I mean, just even what we were talking about before, like the position of somebody that lives on the shore near the ocean has a different relationship to that than the people that live in the mountains or in the plains or in the heart of a city, right? And they have a different relationship with that. I mean, there's folks that talk about New York City, for example, that have just as much passion about New York City as you're expressing about the ocean, right? And I think that that's part of the dynamic that we're trying to understand and appreciate, that these things, it's not can they coexist, it's they do coexist.
Exactly, right. And I think it's not even necessarily about pretending like we will ever understand that person's unique perspective, because we won't, right? There is no possible way for us to understand that person. But at least acknowledging at the most superficial value orientation that this person does think or feel differently than I do is a complete game changer, and then how you proceed forward. But not just assuming that everybody ought to think and feel this way and in this line.
Well, I think this is a great way to sort of like end our episode today in this sort of like perspective of like we are all different. We all have different experiences, different opinions, and we can all coexist together.
And there's an environment for everyone, even if you live in urban New York City.
Yeah,
the environment is there, and it's for everyone.
And I think it's an important message to leave for everyone during these times right now.
Yeah. I have one last reminder for folks. If you have ideas about things that you would like for us to talk about in the show, or just issues that you think are interesting that you want us to grapple with, so to speak, you can email us at creative. What is it? Creative J? Jay, bring that up on the screen, would you?
It is currently up on the screen.
Okay, great. So email us.
creativejpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you. But
Fantastic.
I just bobbled that one. I was doing good for a second there, and then I just kind of screwed that up. Well, thank you, Miriah,
Thanks
for being
for having
here.
me.
Thank
This
you.
was fun.
It was such a lovely conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much.
See the light.
podcast produced at Southern Connecticut State University by faculty, students, and staff who are interested in exploring our creative potential.